happening tonight in Vancouver.
This was the most deadly weather event in Canadian history.
The heat dome that we experienced in late June was unlike any other extreme heat event we've seen in Canada. Just ahead, a new report on the deadly temperatures that killed hundreds of people.
We've been working on trying to have a very soft touch on enforcement. We have not made this about cracking down.
BC's vaccination pass policy is in place, but it's not clear what's being done to make sure it's being followed.
Emotional moments in court as the preacher involved in an assault on a man in Vancouver's West End in August of last year pleads guilty to a lesser charge. The assault left the other man in hospital with a broken leg.
This is City News Everywhere.
This event was very, very improbable to happen if climate change wasn't with us.
In late June, British Columbia was trapped in a heat dome, with many parts of the province seeing extreme, record-breaking temperatures. Now a new report shows that June's heat wave was the deadliest weather event in Canadian history.
This was the most deadly weather event in Canadian history, probably by a factor of about 3.
At a conference of the Union of BC Municipalities on Wednesday, Dr. Sarah Henderson with the BC Centre for Disease Control described the severity of the heat dome in June.
We speak about this as a 1 in 1,000 year event. It hopefully gives you a picture of how extreme this event was. We had temperatures from the 27th to the 29th that had simply never been recorded before across many, many parts of the province.
On June 29th, Vancouver hit its highest ever recorded temperature of 32.4 degrees Celsius, which exceeds the average temperature on that day for the last 4 years by nearly 12 degrees. Further inland, Abbotsford hit 42.9 degrees on June 28th, and in the interior of BC, Canada's hotspot of Lytton hit 48.6 degrees on June 29th. The next day, Lytton burned to the ground. Meanwhile, heat-related deaths were skyrocketing in the province.
Provincially, over this 1 week period, the hottest 1 week, there was about 100% increase in provincial mortality.
Out of people's memory, I don't think they've seen anything like this. And that shows, and it's also showed by the fact that so many people died, because if we expected these events, then we would have been more prepared.
But the warnings were out there. Early on, some meteorologists were calling it a heat wave of concern, or even one of the worst heat waves in history. Ambulance dispatchers and paramedics described the heat wave emergency response as a complete system collapse.
We clearly have to be better prepared to invite the public to common places. Again, during a global pandemic, difficult to do, to find cooling centers, hiring more paramedics, hiring more frontline workers to address these challenges.
In Vancouver, Keir Junos, City News.
We have questions about what exactly happened. We are looking into that very rapidly.
With just 3 days to go before the federal election, Liberal leader Justin Trudeau playing defense after it was revealed one of his candidates was charged with sexual assault.
It's been 5 days since BC's proof of vaccination policy has been in place, requiring you show proof of immunization and ID to get into places like restaurants. But still, no word yet on what kind of enforcement is being done, if any.
That interagency group that I was talking about will be able to examine the situation and enforce accordingly. There could be violations of the liquor licensing in effect. There could be WorkSafe violations. There could be COVID safety plan violations. All of those things can be enforced by the appropriate agency.
This despite online groups like this listing businesses that are not complying or owners vowing not to comply with the health order.
We've been working very closely with the Restaurant Association, for example. They've made it clear to their members that they need to follow the orders. As I said, when complaints are made, they can go up to the interagency table within my ministry, and they can look at the infraction that's taking place and what's taking place, and the appropriate penalty can be levied.
We've been working on trying to have a very soft touch on enforcement. We have not made this about cracking down. We've made this about following the lead of the public.
Most of them, he says, want the added protection of the vaccination pass. Those who don't are very vocal about it.
but they are a distinct minority. And as regrettable as it is that those who disagree with 2.7 million British Columbians and counting should take it up with their elected representatives, not with the people who are trying to make a living.
2.7 million is how many in BC have accessed their proof of vaccine QR codes so far. As for the businesses that are being harassed for following health orders, some even facing lawsuits for doing so.
We have been working with the business community on the introduction of the vaccine card and the vaccine passport. We know that some businesses have gone and hired additional security, particularly those obviously involved in entertainment, bars, for example. And in fact, many of them have them already in place. But we will be working with businesses and business associations to see how things evolve and ways in which the province can ensure that things are running the way they're supposed to.
But no details on what, if any more help, might be coming their way. For City News in Victoria, I'm News 1130's Lisa Yuzda.
11 people have died in BC over the past day due to COVID-19. That is the highest single-day death toll in months. BC reporting 768 new cases on Friday. There are currently 6,031 active cases of COVID-19 in the province. Of the active cases, 298 people are in hospital and 135 are in intensive care. 11 deaths have been reported over the last 24 hours. The health minister says over the past couple of weeks, more than 86% of hospitalizations were due to people who are not fully vaccinated.
The preacher involved in an assault that led to a man being treated in hospital for his broken leg for almost a month has pleaded guilty in relation to this incident to a lesser charge.
The incident drew national attention, spurring a phone call between the victim and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Dory Love has been known for anti-gay rhetoric and was in the neighborhood when Justin Morissette, who lives nearby, came up to him and grabbed Love's microphone. This all resulted in Morissette suffering a broken leg. Emotions ran high as Morissette, who works for Sportsnet 650 in Vancouver, took to the microphone in the courtroom to talk about what the injury had done to him. Sobbing, he said going to therapy is a terrifying prospect for him as he doesn't want to relive what he's lost, including his wrestling show and steady work, saying, quote, "Sometimes it feels as though my career is as destroyed as my leg." In court, Love provided an apology letter that will be given to Morissette as part of the conditions and spoke briefly to say he wishes Morissette the best. Initially, Love was charged with aggravated assault, but earlier this year, his lawyer says he had a change of heart about going through a trial. He agreed to plead guilty to the lesser charge of assault causing bodily harm. Crown and Defense had agreed to an 18-month sentence, but were not in agreement as to whether it should be a suspended sentence or a conditional discharge. A suspended sentence would have resulted in a criminal conviction. Ultimately, Judge Reg Harris said Love had taken steps to turn his life around 13 months later and that he has been following other ordered conditions. That brought the time frame down to 12 months and a conditional discharge. There are also some other important points. The judge said that based on the evidence he viewed in court, Morissette could have actually broken the law by grabbing the microphone out of the preacher's hand twice, that those events could have constituted theft or even causing a disturbance. Judge Harris saying, quote, "He came within inches of Dory Love's face." Harris also says that as far as the court is concerned, there were no words of hate spoken during the altercation, which Morissette has previously said was why he confronted Love in the first place. As for conditions, Love is not allowed to be in any kind of contact with Morissette. He is not allowed to be in certain parts of the city of Vancouver, including English Bay and Sunset Beach, and is also not allowed to use any kind of voice amplifying system in BC. Love has since moved back to Ontario after receiving a warning from police about death threats on his life. In Vancouver, Ria Renouf, City News.
A major rainstorm hit Metro Vancouver today, up to 80 millimeters expected over the course of the day. We're seeing reports of flooding and some power outages. BC Hydro says this storm could be the first of many storms that are expected to put pressure on the province's power grid this fall.
The conditions this year are very similar to what we experienced in 2015, which was one of our biggest windstorms ever. So very dry ground, vegetation weakened by very high temperatures, and we're just warning customers that it could be a difficult storm season, and we just want them to be prepared.
rescue calls. After being called upon 5 times over the weekend, North Shore Rescue has already smashed the team's record for the number of rescue calls. And the winter conditions haven't even set in yet. Ahead of the final weekend of the summer, the continent's busiest volunteer search and rescue team says it has already completed 174 operations. That's a new record. It ended last year with 151. Mounties in Surrey are asking for help finding a teen who's been missing since early Friday morning. Sanjana Singh, who is 18, was last seen leaving her home on 188A Street near 55 Avenue. Police say it is unusual for her to not be in contact with her family, and they are worried for her well-being. A man has been sent to hospital after a stabbing at a busy Burnaby SkyTrain station late Thursday night. It happened at the Lougheed SkyTrain station before 9 p.m. Metro Vancouver Transit Police say the victim's injuries are serious but not life-threatening. Police say the victim approached a group that was smashing bottles onto the sidewalk below, trying to get them to stop their dangerous behavior.
We have questions about what exactly happened. We are looking into that very rapidly.
With just 3 days to go before the federal election, Liberal leader Justin Trudeau on his heels after the Toronto Star revealed one of his candidates was charged with sexual assault in 2019, a charge that was later dropped.
We only learned about these serious allegations yesterday through the work of the Toronto Star. We are looking into it very carefully, and we have asked the candidate to pause his campaign.
Spadina Fort York candidate Kevin Vuong says the allegations against him are false. The NDP pouncing on Trudeau for not dismissing Vuong.
Either this candidate in Toronto lied to the Liberal Party and the Liberal Party is okay with that, or the Liberal Party knew all along and Mr. Trudeau is okay with that.
Parties only have 3 days left to convince Canadians to vote for them. Most polls show the Liberals and Conservatives in a tight race, with the NDP currently in third place. In Windsor, Ontario, Trudeau's team facing a common sight: protesters.
Why are all these people here and he's getting harassed?
Trudeau using the opportunity to slam Conservative leader Erin O'Toole for his approach on vaccinations.
How do you think he's going to be able to lead Canada on vaccinations if he can't even convince the people who signed up to follow him, who made him leader, to get vaccinated?
Meanwhile, the NDP slamming Trudeau for sending Canadians to the polls.
The calling of this election, there was no reason for it. It was called during the fourth wave, when Mr. Trudeau knew full well there was be a fourth wave of COVID-19. He called the election anyways, despite the forest fires, despite the crises going on. It was a selfish decision.
Similar criticism from Conservative leader Erin O'Toole.
If Justin Trudeau is rewarded for calling a $600 million election in the middle of a pandemic, everything you've come to dislike about Mr. Trudeau, the lectures, the division in this country, the hypocrisy, the rising prices, they will all only get worse.
But O'Toole had his own issues threatening to undermine his party's chances. He found himself downplaying previous praise he gave to Alberta Premier Jason Kenney, who is now watching hospitals fill up with COVID patients after declaring an open summer earlier this year. O'Toole even refusing to say Kenney's name.
I know premiers' names. The most important thing is I don't care about their political party. I care about the Canadians in their provinces.
In Ottawa, Nigel Newlove, City News.
This week in science, we're back at the observatory, talking about the next giant leap for astronomy, NASA's James Webb Space Telescope. And that's because it's finally done. Scheduled to blast off from French Guiana on December 18th. It's taken a lot to get to this point. 25 years, nearly $10 billion US, and the collective efforts of thousands of scientists from 14 different countries, including Canada. And what's really nerve-wracking about the deployment of James Webb is we literally have one shot at it. Its planned orbit is 1.5 million kilometers away, so there's no practical way to fix it if something goes horribly wrong, like it did when the Hubble was brought online in 1990. But for astronomers, the risk, the delays, the cost overruns, it's all worth it to get us closer to unlocking the mysteries of the cosmos.
How did this all come to be? right? Let's just go straight for the fundamental questions. Why are we here?
That's Krista Van Leerhoven, Vice President of the Yukon Astronomical Society. She says while James Webb has some of the same science goals as the Hubble, its primary mirror is way bigger, allowing it to capture light from much more faint and distant objects. It also sees the universe in a pretty different way.
With Hubble, we mostly see the same sort of colors that we see with our eyes, and a little bit shorter wavelength into the ultraviolet. With James Webb, we're going the other direction. So we're still some of the light that we see with our own eyes, but mostly towards the infrared.
This allows James Webb to peer into the deepest regions of the cosmos, effectively looking back in time to when the universe was young and revealing more about how stars and galaxies first formed. And here's another big question. Is there life on other planets? James Webb will be able to spot distant worlds and detect clues about what's on them.
There is caution. I don't know that James Webb is in the first year going to go, oh my God, we found life. But they might tell us things like we've got a planet that's maybe got a rocky-ish surface and we know that it's got water.
We're really just scratching the surface here of what James Webb is capable of doing. You can definitely expect the same kind of awe-inspiring images that Hubble is famous for cranking out. Now we just have to cross all of our fingers and toes that it doesn't blow up on the launch pad. With This Week in Science on City News, I'm News 1130's Curtis Doring.
Very cool stuff. Vancouver's news is always available on the radio with News 1130 or online anytime at citynews1130.com. Your next edition of City News is tonight at 11. Thank you for watching and have a great night.